Hey, paisanos, ever wonder what would happen if you combine one of the most famous literary characters of all time, Tarzan, with one of the most famous video game characters of all time, Mario? Well, you would get Mario of the Apes, which was an episode on the Super Mario Brothers Super Show that originally aired in 1989. And we're going to be taking a look at that episode in this video. But first, buckle up because I'm going to be letting you guys know what a Super Mario Brothers Super Show even is and who these characters are, because who they were back in '89 is a little bit different than who they are now. So let's start out with the easy one. I do a lot of Tarzan videos. So who the heck is Tarzan? Tarzan is a character created by the author Edgar Rice Burroughs, first published in 1912. Burroughs would write 24 novels and several other stories with the character. Tarzan was orphaned in the African jungle, and he was raised by the great apes. He would discover his humanity in the books and other items he discovers in his parents' cabin. He would meet an American woman named Jane Porter and fall in love and marry her. They would settle in an African estate where they would live with Tarzan's adoptive native tribe of the Waziri. They would have many adventures involving lost civilizations and hidden worlds filled with dinosaurs. Now, that's Tarzan from the novels. There are also movies, and at the time in 1989, the most famous of which would have been the old black and white MGM movies starring Johnny Westmuller that had nothing to do with the novels. So in these movies, a woman named Jane Parker, not Porter, finds a man named Tarzan who is inexplicably living in the jungle with animals and speaks broken English. And she falls in love with him and she stays behind with him and becomes a jungle girl. They live in a treehouse with a boy named Boy and a chimpanzee named Cheetah. Did I mention this has nothing to do with the novels? However, the movies are where we get the idea of Tarzan swinging around on vines and where we get the famous and iconic Tarzan yell from. And for kids in 1989, even if we hadn't seen the movie, this is where we would have gotten our impression of who Tarzan was. And so moving on, who is Mario? Mario is the flagship character for the video game company Nintendo. Mario first appeared in the 1981 arcade game Donkey Kong, in which he was a construction worker who was trying to save a damsel in distress from an ape named Donkey Kong who had taken over his construction site. And then he was the villain in the sequel Donkey Kong Jr., in which you play Donkey Kong's son, who is trying to save his father from the villainous Mario. And then Mario took up plumbing with his brother Luigi for the two-player game called Mario Brothers, in which they try to rid the sewers of turtles, crabs, and flies. And then there is the defining seminal work that is Super Mario Brothers. Unlike these previous games, it is no longer single screen. It is a side-scrolling adventure in the magical Mushroom Kingdom, which is honeycombed with hidden items, secret rooms, warp zones, and you are fighting an army of turtles called Koopa who have kidnapped a princess. The first stage is set outside, and then the second stage is set underground. The third stage, you're actually jumping around cliffs, and then the fourth stage is a fiery castle filled with lava, in which you have a confrontation with Bowser, the King Koopa. Now, in the previous games, this would be where you beat the game, rescue the princess, and loop back to the first level. But instead, if you beat Bowser, you find out from a mushroom retainer that your princess is in another castle and that this was only the first of 8 worlds. And so you can only rescue the princess if you defeat Bowser in the 8th castle in the game. And so if you do that, then you will finally rescue Princess Toadstool, who in later games would be known as Peach. Peaches, 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 peaches. Ah! Oh, yeah! The game was super successful, so it had a sequel in Japan, Super Mario 2, which was extremely difficult, and by the time it would have released in the US, would have looked very dated. And so instead, they reskinned a game called Doki Doki Panic, putting in Mario characters to release it as Super Mario 2 in America. And so it is a Mario like game, but in this one, you can actually pick up and throw things. You can pick up and throw enemies, but most time you're picking up and throwing vegetables. Sometimes you're even picking up and throwing bombs. It had completely new enemies, some of which have appeared in later Mario games. Others are probably unfamiliar to modern players. And so one of them is a snake that spits bullets called a cobrat. There was also a mini boss named Birdo who would spit eggs at the end of almost every level. And most of the worlds had unique bosses like Mouser, who was a mouse who threw bombs at you that you had to toss back at him. And the best part is you got to pick who you played as. So you could be Mario, who was the all-rounder. You could be his brother Luigi, who had this flighty high jump. You could be the mushroom retainer, now called Toad, who was really fast at picking stuff up. Or you could be Princess Toadstool, who has the ability to float, which was a godsend in this game. It was also the first time that I'm aware of that a damsel in distress from a previous game got to be the hero in the next one. And so that brings us to the Super Mario Super Show, which was turning the Mario characters into classic cartoon characters like Looney Tunes. And so back then, classic cartoon characters like Looney Tunes, Woody Woodpecker, Tom and Jerry, they were oftentimes aired as one show that would have a host, right? It would be a live action host who would have guest stars and little skits to keep the kids entertained between the cartoons. In my area, the host was Billy Bob, because I live in a particularly redneck part of the country, so your host may have varied. And it was also the 90s, so they had to make these characters hip and cool for the kids. And so, of course, it opened with a rap.
Hey, paisanos, it's the Super Mario Brothers Super Show!
With the Mario Brothers and plumbing's our game. We're not like the others who get all the fame. If your sink is in trouble, you can call us on the double. We're faster than the others, you'll be hooked on the brothers.
And yes, my friends, you will recognize that from the opening of the Super Mario Brothers movie. That's where they got it from. And so the live action segments were essentially kind of sitcom kind of skits, which would have the cartoon play in the middle. And so the actors who voiced Mario and Luigi also played them in the live action segments. So you had Captain Lou as Mario and Danny Wells as Luigi. And while they typically weren't my cup of tea, I will say the one that runs with Mario the Apes is probably one of the better ones. Mario is trying to become the Chippy Chipmunk of the month, and he has to do good deeds for an entire day in order to earn it. And Luigi, being his brother, of course, exploits this and takes advantage of Mario in some very amusing ways. Every episode had a guest star in the live action segments. Usually it was a comedian you've never heard of, but sometimes it was a celebrity like Cyndi Lauper, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Magic Johnson, Sergeant Slaughter, and every episode would end like this.
Till next time, everybody, to the Mario!
Do the Mario! Swing your arms from side to side. Come on, it's time to go. Do the Mario. Take one step and then again. Let's do the Mario all together now.
See, you didn't know that the Mario Brothers theme song had words to it. I wish Jack Black would do something with the Mario and make it go viral. And yes, this show is available on streaming services like Tubi, where you can watch it for free. And it is also available on broadcast TV. MeTV Tunes has just started airing the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. One odd thing you're going to notice if you're watching it on streaming is that every single episode has something like this.
We need some time to find a good lawyer.
Right. So why don't you take a look at these scenes from the next Legend of Zelda? It's under L, I think, huh?
And this is a tease for the Zelda cartoon that they would play on Fridays. Instead of a Mario cartoon, it would be Zelda. Unfortunately, those Friday episodes do not exist either on streaming or MeTV. And that's a bit of a shame because some of those Friday episodes had some memorable live action segments. For instance, the first one had the Mario Brothers being haunted. And so, who are you going to call? Ernie Hudson from Ghostbusters. Some of those Friday episodes were put out on VHS tape, and fans have uploaded the live action segments on YouTube to preserve them. However, the Zelda cartoon is easily accessible. If you have Super Mario Super Show listed on streaming, you should have Zelda listed separately, and you can also get it on DVD. The cartoon is based almost entirely on the first Legend of Zelda game, in which Link was an adventurer whose journeys had taken him to Land of Hyrule when it was under siege by the evil wizard Ganon. The story was very slight, and we knew almost nothing about the characters, so they just had to make up something for the show. The scripts from Bob Ford are well written. They combine romance, comedy, adventure, and fantasy in a very effective way and have some very impressive fight scenes. This is the best fight scene choreography I had seen in an American show up until that point. And these episodes of Zelda were always the highlight of the Super Mario Super Show to me. But the animated Mario segments that aired Monday through Thursday were no slouch either. They were 13-minute animated segments that were based on the first two Super Mario games because the other games did not exist yet. And so they had slight story to them. Very little is known about the characters, so they had to make up some stuff too. But they pulled music, sound effects, and enemies from both of those games. But of the two, Super Mario 2 is the one that the cartoon is most based on. This was the newest game and the big game that was out at the time that they were trying to promote. And I think that was a great thing for the show because you had all four heroes, Mario, Luigi, Toad, and Princess Toadstool, all there as your heroes. They still kept Bowser from the first game, calling him King Koopa as the head of the villains. And so I actually recommend, if you have the opportunity to play Super Mario 2, play it before you watch the show because you'll appreciate where all the sound effects and the enemies and all that come from. But not all the sound effects are from the game. In fact, when Toad hits something or he jumps, he makes this noise. I'm not sure why he sounds like a squeaky toy, but I'm glad he does. You can listen for that in every episode. It's fun. Now, there would be cartoons and comics that would come out later that would try to adapt the later games. And they would do this by adapting it directly. And I was never very satisfied with that. I think the first real success at that in America was the Super Mario movie. However, that is not what the Super Mario Super Show tried to do. They took a completely different tact and had almost every single episode be a parody. And so oftentimes it was a parody of a movie or show, and it would be amazing how you would see Bowser and his minions kind of slot into these different roles from these different movies, especially Mouser. So, for instance, in the episode Star Koopa, which is a parody of Star Wars, King Koopa becomes Darth Koopa. In the James Bond parody, Her Majesty's Sewer Service, King Koopa becomes Koopfinger, and Mouser gets to do his best impression of Oddjob. And in Toad Warriors, they get to be decked out as Mad Max-style villains, including Mouser, who actually gets to wear fetish gear in a children's cartoon. One thing, unfortunately, you are going to be missing is there were some licensed songs that were used during the climactic parts of most of the episodes. And so, for instance, in Toad Warriors, during the climactic chase/battle, you would have Bad to the Bone playing, which was just perfect for that scene. But I will say that the replacement for these licensed songs is done very well, and normally you won't even know that they're missing. However, there is a compilation preserving all of these segments with their original music that you can find on YouTube, And I am happy to report that Mario of the Apes is not missing a song. They actually did not do any licensed music for that episode, so you will be seeing that episode as it originally aired. And it was such a strange but brilliant move to turn most of the segments into parodies because it just works. Now, I don't think that these Mario cartoons we're talking about for the Super Show are necessarily as good as your classics like Looney Tunes or Animaniacs or Titans Go, but they were good. On a good episode, they were funny, they were exciting, and they perfectly captured what they were lampooning in just 13 minutes. And it wasn't just movies, it was also stories from literature. So you had 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Romeo and Juliet, Sherlock Holmes, Zorro, and yes, Tarzan of the Apes. And so that brings us to the episode Mario of the Apes. First of all, I just want to say it's a nice looking episode. I think the show is animated well and the backgrounds look great. Jungles can be very challenging, especially when you're trying to adapt them to a cartoon style, but I think it looks very good here. And so in the episode, Mario and his friends are in Jungle World when they are attacked by King Koopa and an albatross that grabs Mario. And yes, an albatross is a bird-like enemy from the second Mario game. And so things go horribly wrong, of course, and Mario starts plummeting to his doom. Meanwhile, there are two apes who live in a treehouse, and their names are Ward and June, hilariously named after the parents from Leave It to Beaver. And Ward and June are expecting the stork to deliver them a little bundle of joy. And so when Mario crash lands onto their porch and has his memory taken away by the hit to the head, they believe that Mario is their new son. And so he becomes Tarzan of the Apes. And so they teach him the ways of the jungle. He gets to swing on vines. He gets to do his own version of the Tarzan yell. He hangs out with monkeys. He gets in a fight with a lion. And of course, Mario is going to get his own version of the Tarzan outfit. And we even find out he has body hair, which is funny because even back in the 90s, that was a rare thing on a fictional character. And he then runs into a female simian who develops a crush on him in a brief scene. His friends get to play the role of the hapless Westerners who get in trouble in the jungle, and he has to swing in and save them. And then they're disturbed by the fact that Mario doesn't seem to know them at all. King Koopa takes the role of our Western villain who comes into the jungle thinking that he can take it over and exploit it. And the Shy Guys make the perfect spear-chucking natives who are in his employ. And they're able to wrap everything up in only 13 minutes. There's a big climactic battle, a satisfying ending, and throughout the episodes, there are amusing jokes and entertaining things throughout. And so I would say it's definitely one of the better episodes of the series. I really enjoyed it. And so you may ask, is it based on the novels or the movies? And the answer is yes. It's based on both. So, of course, the treehouse and Mario speaking broken English when he's Tarzan is straight out of the movies. Tarzan being raised by apes is straight out of the first novel, Tarzan of the Apes. And a simian having a crush on him is very reminiscent of one of the later novels, Jungle Tales of Tarzan. And him losing his memory is actually another thing that is straight out of one of the later Tarzan novels. Tarzan and the Jewels of Opar actually have Tarzan losing his memory and reverting back to his childhood when he thought he was an ape. If you ever want to see a really cool serial from the silent movie era, check out Tarzan the Tiger, which does a greatly expanded version of Tarzan and the Jewels of Opar, focusing on Tarzan's memory loss and Jane's attempt to win back her amnesiac husband. And then Mario of the Apes also had just general Tarzan elements like fighting lions, rescuing Westerners, fighting the evil Western villain that are usually present in just any version of the character. And as a Tarzan fan, I think they did a good job. I don't have any complaints. And I'm just happy that I rediscovered this episode that I'd forgotten about. All right, that's it. Like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, do the Mario!